this rather long book about a fascinating, formative, and somewhat under-researched period of Gandhi's life. And I'll say something about my intention in this book, what the kinds of new things and new characters I've tried to showcase in this book. But before I do so, I'll just mark the major milestones in the first 45 years of his life. Gandhi is born in Porbandar in 1869. His father was Diwan to the Raja. 5 years later, the family moves inland to Rajkot, where his father becomes the Diwan to the ruler of Rajkot. Gandhi's schooling is mostly in the town of Rajkot. It is a school that was called the Kathiawar High School when he studied there, and has now been appropriately renamed the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial School. And a stroke of good luck was that I stumbled upon an obscure publication brought out in 1966 containing Gandhi's school mark sheets. It was, these were compiled by a Gujarati school teacher who had worked in the Kathiawar High School later on, had found these mark sheets and attendance records in a cupboard, and had systematically compiled them. And of course, they were fascinating. Not least because Gandhi was a comprehensively and consistently mediocre student. All through his school career, he got a second class, which delighted me, because I always got a second class myself. Now, of course, one takes pride in being a first-class student, and one takes a kind of perverse pride in being a third-class student. But to be absolutely mediocre in the middle, as I was, and to find that Mohandas K. Gandhi was also always between, in a class of 60, he would be between 25 and 35. So he was a mediocre student. He was reared in a conventional Baniya household, obsessed with food, vegetarianism, cleanliness. Fortunately, his mother exposed him to a slightly wider worldview. His mother, Putlibai, was born in a sect called the Pranamis, whose founder was supposed to have visited Mecca, and whose shrines had verses of the Gita on one wall and verses of the Quran on the other. Gandhi's closest friend in school was a Muslim. They were Parsi fellow students in his school. He would like to study the law in England and gets a loan from his brother, Lakshmidas. So he goes to England in 1888, spends 2 years and a bit there. And I argue in my book that the most important thing about these London years was the time he spent with an obscure sect named the Vegetarian Society of London. Now, London in 1888, 89, 1890 was a great imperial city. It was the world's greatest city. It had people of 40 or 50 nationalities. It was a center of economic power, political power, great cultural creativity, the flowering of the theatre, fantastic sport. W.G. Grace was still batting at Lord's, but Gandhi couldn't care about W.G. Grace batting at Lord's or Bernard Shaw's plays being premiered at the West End. London in the 1880s was also a time of political ferment. Karl Marx had just died, but his associate Engels was active. Gandhi had no interest in that either. Instead, Gandhi threw in his lot with the Vegetarian Society of London. And his first friends were English vegetarians. When Gandhi went to England, he was a vegetarian by upbringing, by tradition. In London, he became a vegetarian by conviction. And he first recognized the need to befriend people of other races and other religions. He set up a home with a man called Josiah Oldfield, who was to remain his friend for a very long time. And they would have, as he describes, boiled soup for dinner. And in the daytime, go and proselytize in the locality and try to convert the beef-eating Englishmen to their point of view. The vegetarians gave Gandhi a home, a cause, his first English friends, and most importantly, his first training as a writer. Those 97 volumes begin with a series of essays published by Gandhi in the Journal of the Vegetarian Society of London. Now, I'm sure there's some young writers in this room. And I've been a young writer myself, a young struggling writer, who knows how hard it is to get a single article, when you're unknown and obscure, a single article published in a newspaper. Now, Gandhi made his debut in the form of a 6-part series. Now, I envy him his luck, even if it was the Journal of the Vegetarian Society of London. But it's through those writings that Gandhi understood the importance of communication. Among other things, he was a writer and an editor all through his working life. So he comes back to India in 1891, a law degree in hand. And when he comes off the boat in Mumbai, which is where Mumbai again enters his story, he learns that his mother has just died. He is taken to the home of a friend he had met in London called Pranjeevan Mehta, who I'll say a little bit about later. And in this home, which is now Mani Bhavan in Gurgaon, that's the first home that Gandhi comes to in 1891, he meets a Jain thinker called Rai Chand Bhai, who takes him out of the depression he feels because of his mother's death. So he then returns to Rajkot, possibly hoping that he could make a career as an official in the princely states of Kathiawar. His father and grandfather had been Diwans of Porbandar, and it appears that Gandhi's brother Lakshmi Das, elder brother Lakshmi Das, who had funded his London education, likewise thought that his well-qualified brother Mohandas, with a law degree from London, could become Diwan of Porbandar. At this point, there was a king, the king was in disgrace, and his grandson was being groomed to take over as the heir of the king. And the grandson, the prince, was advised by Gandhi's brother Lakshmi Das. In his autobiography, Gandhi has a very elusive line about his brother being in trouble with the heir to the throne of Kathiawar. But the truth is as follows. As part of his intrigue and his affiliation with the heir to the throne, Lakshmi Das, Gandhi's brother, was an accomplice in a theft of the palace jewels. He was caught, as was the thief, and Lakshmi Das was externed from their home state of Porbandar, and a dark shadow hung over the name of Gandhi. Gandhi then comes to Bombay, tries to make a career as a lawyer and fails, returns to Rajkot and is unsuccessful as a lawyer there too, whereupon he is rescued by an invitation from South Africa to settle a dispute between two Gujarati merchants. And then he goes there and spends almost 2 decades there in 3 different stints. Now, it's important to understand a little bit at this stage about the history of South Africa. South Africa in 1893, when Gandhi goes there, comprises 4 distinct colonies. On the eastern seaboard, you have Natal. To its south, also along the sea, you have the Cape. These 2 colonies are controlled by colonists of British descent. Natal's economy is founded on sugar, and it's here where the majority of Indians work. Indians go as indentured laborers on the sugar plantations and coal mines, and they are mostly from South India. They're mostly from Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, some from the UP. And these laboring Indians are followed a little later by merchants largely from Gujarat, Hindu and Muslim, and a few Parsi, who go to service the needs of the Indian workers. So that's Natal. There are a few Indians in the Cape as well, which is again a coastal society dominated by trade. The 2 coastal provinces are controlled by the British. South Africa also has 2 autonomous provinces inland, Transvaal and Orange Free State, which are controlled by the Boers, who are Dutch-speaking Afrikaners. So Gandhi is going at a time when South Africa is in a period of transition. He reaches in 1893. He stays on till 1899, working as a lawyer, chiefly in Natal, largely for merchants, but with a few laborers as also among his clients. In 1899, the Boer War breaks out. And this is a consequence of the gold boom in Johannesburg. Johannesburg is the capital of Transvaal, controlled by the Boers, but the Boers are a farming people, and the more enterprising and entrepreneurial British quickly take control of the gold economy. The mines, the industries, the hotels, the services that are a product of the gold boom are run by the British. This leads to a conflict, an economic and political conflict between the Afrikaners and the British. So there's a war in 1899 in which Gandhi takes the side of the British, and that continues till 1902. In the first period, 1893 to 1900, Gandhi is based in Natal. In 1894, he founds the Natal Indian Congress, takes his first steps as a political activist, succeeds in the law, unlike his failures in Rajkot and Mumbai. He comes back to India in 1901, and he doesn't tell you why he comes back. I speculate in my book that Gandhi returns partly because his wife is homesick, partly because he has 4 children whom he wants to give an Indian education, and partly because there's a lingering desire to establish himself at the Bombay bar. So he comes to Bombay, lives there a year, and fails again to make any kind of headway among the legal fraternity of Bombay. He's recalled to South Africa and goes back because, as in 1893, it's an escape from failure. And this time, on his return, he's based not in Natal, but in Johannesburg. The Boer War has ended with a ceasefire between the British and the Afrikaners. There were about 8,000 Indian residents of Johannesburg and the surrounding areas who had fled during the war because they were regarded as close to the British. And now they began coming back to reclaim their businesses, to re-establish themselves. And Gandhi is playing the role of their representative, trying to get them legal rights of residency, the right to own property, the right to trade, the right to be certified as a bona fide citizen of the Transvaal. And this is proving extraordinarily difficult because the Boers are a somewhat conservative, not to say reactionary people, and also because part of the compromise after the Boer War was that the whites, the Boers and the Britons, joined in a union against the colored races, the Indians and, of course, the numerically dominant Africans. So Gandhi starts his campaign for greater rights in a spirit of reasonableness. He writes letters. Then he starts a journal, Indian Opinion, started in 1904 and published in as many as 4 languages, English, Hindi, Gujarati, and Tamil. So he tries to get the rights of Indians regularized. And when that fails, he and his people organized a series of satyagrahas. First in 1906, then in 1907-09, and then finally in 1913-14. And these are described in great detail in my book, so I won't give you a summary of the struggles, but except to say that the idea of non-violent collective resistance was born in South Africa. It's in South Africa that Gandhi recognized the importance of mobilization, of propaganda, of the collection of funds, and of having a newspaper to articulate the grievances of his people. It's in South Africa that Gandhi first goes to jail. He goes to jail 4 times in the course of his stay. And I'm not going to say any more about the details of the struggles he led because they're all there in my book. But I want to say a little bit now about the circle around Gandhi. I believe that one of the most important aspects about a biography are the secondary characters around your main subject. You know, a book about Gandhi, that's only about Gandhi, would be rather unidimensional. Because a human being is shaped by his relationships, by his friends, his rivals, his family, his associates, his mentors. And that's really the way a biography should be written, where you see your subject as part of a wider constellation of characters and trace his evolution, his anxieties, his passions, his emotions, his achievements, his failures in the context of these varying relationships. To properly understand Gandhi, you have to look at him from all angles, not just his own, but from that of his friends and followers and of his enemies and adversaries. Now, when you think of Gandhi's time in India, if you look at Gandhi's Indian phase, the decades of the 20s and 30s and 40s, everyone in this room knows something, maybe not enough, but something about the secondary characters. You know about Gandhi's close political associates, Patel, Nehru, and Rajaji, who are called respectively the hand, the heart, and the head of Gandhi. Patel being the hand, Nehru being the heart, and Rajaji being the head. So you know about his political associates, Maulana Azad, Rajendra Prasad. You know about his inner circle of disciples in the ashram, Miraben, J.C. Kumarappa, Dr. Zakir Hussain. You know about his great Indian adversaries, B.R. Ambedkar and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. You know about the governors and viceroys who opposed him, Willingdon, Sykes, Mountbatten, Irwin, and so on. So you can, to some extent, situate his life, his struggles, his anxieties, his achievements, his failures in the context of all these relationships. But the secondary characters of Gandhi's South African life are largely invisible. And in my book, I have tried, I believe for the first time, to try